Welcome to the Gentleman Gunner. Now today I am excited to bring you the CZ Customs A01 C. Now this is the child-size version of the full-size A01 LD, which you've seen me previously do a review on. Now if you look at the pedigree of the A01 LD, it is solely meant to be a competition gun and is effectively the ultimate CZ75 that can be obtained. Now that was made some time ago and we've seen CZ evolve since then, but doesn't negate that they can still have some fun and make a, well, for better lack of words, a fun-sized version of that gun. And now I have 1,000 rounds through it, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this. Now on CZ Customs website, as outfitted, this does come in at a hefty MSRP of $2,780. Now, I did get lucky because there's not a lot of these out there on the market, nor do they really popped up used, inciting that there's probably not a lot of them out there. So I was lucky enough to get this brand new for $2,250, and this is what I got. Initially I thought, okay, from a distance, it looks like a typical compact CZ. And the first thing that caught my attention was, in fact, that bull barrel. Now, if you don't know the history of this gun, this was Angus Hobdall's response to CZ saying, no, we will not make a CZ75 with the bull barrel, so he did it. And as you get closer to it, you really can start to appreciate the fine detail that's done in all the machining of this gun. I mean, even as I look at it playing through here, you only have a slight protrusion of the bull barrel itself, and the rest of it is just flush. You know, that does take some time in the fitting department, and this is exactly what this gun is. It is a gunsmith fit gun, and as you just rack it, play with it, everything about it feels like a gun that you would expect to find in this price range. This being the child of the A01 LD, it is no surprise it's heavy. In fact, this gun coming in at about 30 ounces with an empty mag, this is 42 ounces, and that makes a big difference in a gun of this size. Now, I want to expand on one thing. The A01 LD was in fact a touch muzzle heavy, and I say a touch because I was surprised that there wasn't more weight out front than I thought there would be visually looking at it. When I took the grip panels off of it to take a closer look of it, and I didn't mention that in the other video, I noticed there's actually a lot more metal that's actually integrated into the frame. That makes a lot of sense because this particular gun feels incredibly balanced, especially compared to its bigger counterpart. And that'll be something you'll see me touch on as a big, huge factor when we go and look at some of the tests. If you saw the video prior, I was a huge fan of the ergonomics of the A01 LD. They did a lot more filling in underneath the grip tang and also gave you a better undercut underneath. They do carry a G10 grip panel like they did on the full-size model, and they have the 25 LPI, which is lines per inch, which is a very fine look to it. So when you actually touch it, it doesn't feel like it's poking your hand per se, but when you move your hand laterally against it, it has the grip. And I found when I was carrying this against my stomach, I didn't really notice any type of abrasion or felt that it was harsh, but I will say it's arguably probably the right amount of grip. When I started to lay out shots, I felt my hand was locked in there. I felt very confident that I was going to do great things with this gun. Typically what you pay for is confidence when you get into this price range, and it did not disappoint for me. The doubles, I was able to maintain a 21 split at about 10 yards and at 3-inch group there, and you know, it just didn't really take much effort, and not surprising. What was surprising was I did have an expectation that the felt recoil would be identical to the A01 LD, which is very soft. This gun, it's a little snappier, and that makes sense. When you lose 1 inch of barrel on the front end of this gun, you do also lose a little bit of travel. When you have a longer slide and setup, you give it more time to rebound and recoil. So essentially, you are gonna feel a little bit more snap to this. Now, from your perspective, if you were to pick this up against any type of polymer gun or even the Shadow 2 Compact, it would be noticeably softer in shooting. Now, if you've been on my channel, I do like to bring data and see it as a basis to see, hey, where did this gun stack up against some others? And I'm going to kind of lean on the Shadow 2 Compact and as well as the A01 LD. Now, the reason for that is because I have iron sight data on those, and this gun particularly is iron sight only. Now looking at the accuracy component, because when they came out with the full-size variant, that was kind of the keystone of it, was its accuracy, and it never disappointed when I had shot it. With this particular gun, you do lose that real estate out front for that practical need, and when I went to get to the accuracy component of it, I was still able to get a very accurate grip. If anything, I was actually more accurate freehand than I was on the bench rest here at 25 yards, and some of the attributing factors too is how well the gun is in lockup. And when this thing is in battery, this thing is rock solid. I mean, there is no movement in the slide or anywhere. And if you don't have those elements correct, you will suffer in accuracy. And this is why hand fitting a gun like this is what you pay for those extra dollars for. And I went over extensively how the trigger group works different than the other CZs, but that carried over into this. And this being machine fit to this gun, everything is solid and crisp when you pull through it, and just walking you through that characteristic. Okay, now bear in mind, you only have really two choices if you're looking to carry this, which would be to run it in double action, or you can simply just run it with the hammer back and have your safety up. Now that is up to you as your discretion of which way you want to go with that. And as you pull through it here, it's a very linear pull. There's no stacking in it. It's what you would expect once you start to put all the nice parts into the Shadow 2s, like the Cajun parts. So that carries over as well. Now the single action definitely is something to talk about. Okay, I've always liked CZ Customs trigger shoe because it's nice and wide and it just feels solid. Now, getting into there, you have just a touch of pre-travel in there, but you're right on that wall. The creep, because of its inherent design, is minimal, but that's it. Now, because this is a CZ Customs gun, they do put their disconnector, and what that means from your perspective is a short reset. And that's it. Adding all those elements up do contribute to that solid accuracy as you saw listed earlier. But in the 25-yard build drill, which I believe is the real practical application of it, this gun definitely turned out some very respectable numbers. Now, talking about our two comparison guns for this video, against the Shadow 2 Compact, it wasn't close in terms of time and produced about identical accuracy. Now, the A01 LD is still the fastest gun I've had on here for the 25-yard build drill because it's made for it. And no surprise that it wasn't close to it, but considering the size of this gun and its real estate, this gun still performed over my expectations. And if you compare this against other guns I've had on this channel, this gun is definitely holding its weight against some pretty big heavyweights. Because the gun is cycling quicker than the A01 LD, it does return to zero quicker. The challenge I had with that particularly was I was a little bit confident in the beginning of this drill pulling off shots quicker, which made my accuracy kind of a challenge. Now I just had to be a touch more patient and it rewarded me with respectable numbers. But we're gonna get into the manipulation of this gun because, well, it's one thing to shoot it in a straight line, but it's another thing to get to work. So the reloads of it, well, you've got this fairly large paddle here to hit, and just getting to it is nice and easy, so this mag just pulls right out. And CZ Customs does provide you with two P07 15-round magazines. You can, in fact, use the larger P09 magazines if you so choose. The reloads I always felt were natural. When I was running a match with this gun, I never really had to think about it. I was slightly concerned that I would hit my pinky here because it does protrude a little bit, but I really was in the habit of making sure that I had a little bit of release on my pinky, so I didn't hit it. Now, one of my gripes always with the Shadow 2 specifically were these serrations because they kind of dipped into the frame, and a lot of times I found myself personally, I'd have my hands right against the frame, so racking it became kind of a challenge. This is what I love about the A01, is the first time I noticed it, is that because you have this bull barrel, well, you inherently have wider shoulders here up on here. Now, these serrations effectively become more effective because they are fairly grippy. And when you get your hand up here for that overhand rack, it is easy to pull it back and get to work. Transitions on this channel are arguably some of my favorite things to talk about. Now, this particular gun did not disappoint in that department, and I talked about the balance earlier. This is where it shined, because when I pulled up the results against the A01 and the Shadow 2 Compact, I was surprised. In fact, the times were very similar to the A01 LD. And a large part of that is because I felt much more confident swinging this gun from target to target. And because it was a little smaller and learning from that 25-yard bill drill to be a touch more patient, I produced a slightly better accuracy. And I was rewarded with that in the overall hit factor, actually trumping that. Now I want to talk about one con of this gun, and it's holster availability. On CZ Customs website, they don't make anything specifically for the A01 C. Now, if you wanted to run an outside of the waistband setup, you can certainly run one of those holsters, especially if you're going to do competition, but for appendix, you're very limited. And what I ended up having to do is use my Black Scorpion one I used for my Shadow 2 compact and loosening it up just enough to get in there. Now, it does come in and out freely, but I will say this, guys. If you are looking to get something appendix, you are probably going to have to go custom on this one. And to round that off, I did try one for a P01 because I did find a guy on the internet that tried one and had positive results. The trigger guard is a little bit different, so it doesn't quite fit in there like you would expect. But that's it for the holsters, guys. That's a pretty big one, and something you're going to have to consider when you buy this. Now, reliability wasn't too bad. Over the course of 1,000 rounds, I only had one malfunction with this gun, and it did have a stovepipe. That's something I'd seen on its bigger brothers there. I'd had quite a few of those on the other A01 LDs I have, but I only had the one on this, and I was very surprised, especially this being a brand new gun and as tightly fitted as it is. And in that 1,000 round time, I did oil it a little bit, but I didn't clean it. And so the gun continued to run in. Typically, you would think guns with tolerances this tight would be temperamental, and this gun just kept going. And to tie in the practicality of this, I did carry this for over the course of a few months. The one thing that did surprise me, considering its weight, was how well it actually carried. It felt in line with how I carried my Shadow 2 compact, so there wasn't a noticeable difference. What I will say though is that I did go to a concealed carry class that we had here locally, a pretty awesome one I might add, and I had my 365 AXG Legion and this, and I alternated between the two. Now this is where the weight and deciding to carry this thing in double action does play a big role, because one of the drills that we had was to draw and shoot a 1-inch circle about 5 yards away. Now, doing that in double action for me wasn't bad, but no matter how hard I tried, I was anywhere from about 2 to 3 tenths slower to hit that ideal target. So what I would say to you guys as a solution, if you're considering this, decide that this is arguably going to be your carry gun and you're going to practice with it. And if you practice with it, it will feel natural. Now, one thing I know that is going to get asked, because it got asked a lot in the Shadow 2 compact video, was does this have a firing pin block? And that answer is no. So who is this gun for? Well, that's an interesting one, and probably something I will lean on you guys for, but I will say that it's definitely for the CZ fanboy, especially the guys that like to collect them and want to carry the finest compact version that you can find. I think considering what's out on the market, i.e. the Shadow 2 compact, it would be tough in today's market. Mind you, this did come out quite some time ago, so in that time in its history it was probably awesome, but by today's standards could be a challenge. But what do you guys think? Would you maybe consider some sort of maybe a Staccato C2 or maybe a DWX over this? I want to hear about that. And if you have one of these, tell us about it. Tell us a little bit more about what you may do for a holster setup, how it shoots. I want to hear about it, and I know other people do too. Now, if you haven't seen my A01 LD video, I will leave that right here for you. And I did an awesome ultimate playlist here for the Shadow 2 compact, which I'll leave right here for you. And with that said, guys, remember, do not get the gun that you love shooting, but get the gun that makes you love shooting. Until next time, we will see you all at the range.